Hey,
Hey, George, how are you?
good, George.
So, thanks for everyone for joining us for today's webinar. We're going to be talking about what is an extremely popular topic at the moment.
Mhm.
So, everyone kind of get settled. Hopefully, everyone is comfortable. We'll get rolling here in a minute. But just some quick introductions. My name is George Herbert. I'm the manager of tech support here at Epiphan Video.
And I'm also with Epiphan Video, and I'm with the marketing group. And we have a lot of customers calling us right now, asking us about how to get set up to do live streaming for in their churches or their places of worship. So obviously, like George said, this is a pretty popular topic. So thanks to everybody for joining in. And we have another guest joining us too, right, George?
Yeah, we do. We're going to get through our agenda here in a moment. So I'm just wanting to make sure that everyone is settled in. We have everyone here before we kick things off. I actually don't have the counter in front of me, George, so maybe just check and see how many people are still coming in before we get
We have
started.
quite a few people join us already, and I can see some good things is that there's people saying hi in the chat on
Awesome.
the Crowdcast site, which is great. Don't forget to add your questions into this chat here,
Yes.
and we'll be fed some of these questions, and we'll try to answer them a little bit throughout the program, but then also towards the end, we'll save some time to address any ones that require a little bit more attention.
Yes, we'll also be putting up some polls periodically.
Right.
For those watching, pay attention for any little notifications in the poll section, and please participate as you feel comfortable. But just some very basic questions that really I think will help with everyone in the audience in terms of better understanding where everyone is on this topic and how to help each other.
Mm-hmm. And I also, one other thing to add is that for those questions that you ask, you can also upvote somebody else's questions. So
Yes.
it's a good way for us to see what are the more popular topics of the day. So don't be afraid to use that little ask a question link in the Crowdcast app.
Absolutely. And of course, yes. And if you see a question that is on your mind that you see someone has already asked, feel free to upvote that to get our attention more. So,
Yeah.
Are we still getting people trickling
We're
in
getting
here?
tons of people coming in. I see people from Saskatoon, Colombia, England, Italy, California, Ohio, Poland. So
Perfect.
we have a worldwide audience, which is great. And hopefully everything we talk about today applies to most of what you're looking for today. So we're going to cover a wide range of things. So maybe, George, we could jump into the agenda for today.
Yeah, exactly. So let's start going through it here. So our agenda for today is going to be looking at these 5 different sections. The first one is looking at sort of 3 different church service live stream setups and kind of talking about what each of those setups entails and which one, where you might be individually, and everyone's going to be kind of all over the place. I know there was a very early question from someone who was already a Pearl Mini customer. So that's definitely one of those types of setups, and we'll get to that. The next topic we're going to talk about very briefly is really bandwidth requirements from live streaming. We'll go through that very briefly, and if people need a more detailed expansion on that topic, we can do it at the end in the question part. And then we'll be talking about live streaming platforms, and that's where we will invite our guest, Phil Thompson from streamingchurch.tv, to join us. He's standing by, and we'll go through a few topics with Phil, and of course, we'll have opportunities to ask him questions as well. And we will also cover Streaming Church's 10 Commandments of Streaming, which is something they shared with us a long time ago, and it was one of the more unique ways of I think delivering the best how-to guide, I think, for this particular audience. Is very creative. So we're going to go through those because all 10 of those points are excellent and honestly very universal live streaming ones to talk about. So we're going to go through those. And then finally, we'll do the Q&A part at the end. And so think about those questions. Feel free to ask them now. We'll promote them into the question part now. People can upvote them. And we might sprinkle some of them through here as they're relevant, but we'll try to hold most of them until the end and address those individually. So our moderators are in chat, going to be looking for those and promoting those to questions as well.
There's also a poll that's happening right now. So click on that little poll button and let us know if you have streamed before or if you haven't. And that'll help us figure out who we're talking to here for today.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. So where are we at on the numbers? Are we ready to jump in a little deeper, do you think?
Let's get started, George. We got
all right.
already.
So we're going to start with looking at three different church service live stream setups and kind of looking at from the simple to the intermediate to the advanced setup. Simple being, getting you going quickly, minimal budget, and we'll kind of dive into more details there. The second, the intermediate, how to maybe go to that next level, still not breaking the bank or needing a massive budget, but trying to improve things and make the experience for the attendees even better. And then, of course, the more advanced ones going to be a little higher budget, but again, takes things to the next level. So, of course, wherever you find yourself on this chart, there is no wrong answer, just a question of, capabilities, budgeting, and what you feel is best for the audience that you're trying to present to, really, and whether it's, obviously we're talking about churches today, but that could be any audience, really.
Mm-hmm. And we understand that we're going to be talking to people who are trying to get set up for today because they have an immediate need, but yeah, no doubt they're thinking also about long term, like how is this going to affect them long term? So while you might be looking for a simple setup today, maybe it'll grow into the point where you want a more advanced setup as you build and as you get used to this whole live streaming environment that we are forced into right now.
Yeah, and it's something that obviously, many people have already been doing. It's been extremely popular in churches already, but of course, it's gone to a whole new level given the current global situation. So let's kick things off and really kind of look at how we make decisions on which setup is going to be right for your church, your house of worship, your synagogue, whatever it is. We are being non-denominational here, but we are going to use some common terms for sure, just so everyone is aware. That is not anything we are trying to pigeonhole or cause offense by any means, just common terminology here. So some of the considerations we have to have are, how much time do you have to be up and running? Is this something that you need to have Sunday morning, 2 days from now? Or is this something or is it next week? Things to consider. What your budget is. Realistically, many churches operate as charities essentially, so there isn't necessarily extra budget items or extra money just laying around. So really contemplating, how much can you realistically budget for this? Mm-hmm. The other thing is where your production is going to take place, especially given current global conditions. Typically, we would see a church live streaming scenario in the church itself, in the sanctuary, that sort of thing, in chapel. That may not be possible right now today due to global conditions. And so we want to look at, where are you able to do that? You might still be able to do that. You might be doing it from your home. You might be doing it from an office in the church, or maybe another hall in the church. There's lots of things to consider there, and that will play a role in your product selection. The other one, of course, and this is a big one as well, your level of technical comfort, where you are at in your understanding of some of these technologies, maybe other skill sets you can draw on from other members of the church, or maybe even reaching out externally to professionals as well, kind of understanding these four different things.
And right now, we have another poll that's just come in where we're asking, what is your role within the church? So again, we want to understand, are you an IT administrator with the church? Or are you a volunteer? Are you a pastor? Let us know. And again, we'll try to direct the conversation towards the bulk of the audience here.
Yeah. So if we look at the simple setup, our first, most basic, this is also going to be the quickest to get going. This is the baseline. What you'll need at a very basic level typically is a webcam, some sort of external microphone typically, and then a computer or a laptop that's going to be running the streaming essentially. That type of setup can be literally exactly what I'm doing from my home right now for this webinar. I'm using a Logitech C920. I'm using a Blue Yeti microphone, and I obviously am using my computer and being able to participate in a Zoom call and then as part of this webinar. I could be using the exact same equipment and creating a stream in a number of different software options. So this is very basic. You could do it with a laptop with a built-in webcam, but when you look back at those other considerations, you might find that an external webcam, something like a Logitech C920, is probably a better choice.
And I can speak to that. As this webinar right now, I have my laptop. I'm using the embedded webcam in my laptop, and I have to prop my laptop in this weird place, and I don't have great controls over my computer as well. And my audio is going to be poor as well because all I'm getting is the speaker on the side. So having dedicated webcam and a microphone would certainly be a leg up for this kind of.
Yeah, so I'm just going to pause for a moment because I am seeing some background chatter here that some people were losing our video for a moment there. I'm not sure exactly where we got lost, so I just want to hang on for a second here, make sure maybe if people are in chat, they can just say whether or not things are working for them and whether or not and what they missed. I'm not sure where people might have missed something.
Well, I think basically we're just talking about this simple setup, and people are going to understand this right away. Use a webcam, an external microphone, and a computer. It's the quickest way to reach your congregation, and for a lot of people, it doesn't require any investment.
Exactly.
So we could I don't know. I'm thinking we could probably move on to the intermediate setup, where it gets a little bit more complex.
Yeah, we'll definitely do that. Again, as George was just saying, this is stuff that you may already have on hand, but there are some best practices here as well. I think the first one in my recommendation for the simple setup, as I mentioned, I'm using a Blue Yeti microphone. When our guest Phil joins us later, you'll see he uses an external microphone as well. I would highly recommend making that minimal investment, even for the simple setup. The microphones that are built into laptops and computers are generally terrible. So making sure that your audio is as best as it can be within your budget is highly recommended. For again, we'll kind of come back to some of these how-tos in our 10 commandments later, but one of the things that's important to remember about live streaming is weaker video is more forgivable than bad audio. Bad audio is unforgivable. And so that's one thing to keep in mind. What this simple setup would look like, I mentioned those items that we have. You have your external microphone coming into your computer, your laptop, hopefully an external webcam or something along those lines to get minimal good quality video, and then you stream it out from there. Pretty straightforward.
We're typically talking about a USB microphone here because most microphones are not USB microphones, right? So
right. There definitely are some other options, but that's definitely a common one, and that exactly like I'm using right now. If we want to step up to the intermediate setup, this is where we're getting a little more serious. Maybe we are operating in a larger physical space. Again, maybe our consideration is that where our location is actually in the sanctuary or in a larger hall of the church. A webcam is not going to do well in a large space. They're just not designed for that. They're designed to be, somewhere within a short distance on top of your monitor on the computer that's in front of you. That's the focal range they're designed for. That's the view that they're set up for. So if we're going to move into a larger space where lighting conditions are going to vary a lot more, we can probably look at a better quality camera where we're going to have more control and more options. So we might look at using a DSLR style camera, preferably a mirrorless or a micro four thirds if you're looking at that, because they're just better at doing live video. Maybe even looking at a PTZ camera so that you can even make some remote adjustments. They often have high quality optical zoom, those kind of things. We're obviously going to mount a camera on a tripod or some sort of physical hard mount, not just propping it up against something. And then we also probably want to look at audio preamps and different microphones, or even a feed from a mixer that we might already have in place inside the church. Most churches have some sort of house audio system. If we can get a feed from that, that's going to be ideal.
And again, it could still just be a microphone here. Maybe you do have audio set up in your church, or maybe you're doing it in one of the rooms of your house of worship. So any kind of audio feed, good quality microphone, either through a mixer or straight into your computer will work as well. We do have a new poll up here on that note asking people, where are their church streams happening? Are they doing it in their where they normally would have their services, or are they using an alternative space like George and I today from our homes?
Exactly. One of the other considerations, if you're looking at the intermediate setup, when you start looking at real cameras, you need some sort of interface to get them into your computer if you're going to be doing this through a software on your computer.
So
and
you
that's
say
where
software. Do you want to tell them a little bit more about what do you mean by software? Why do I have to have software?
Yeah, so I mean, in order to do live streaming, you have to encode the data and stream it out. There's a number of different ways to do that, and I'm using software in a generic term purely because, as we're going to get to in a moment, when we start talking about platform choices, the software choices you make may vary depending on the platform you want to use. Just as a very quick primer to that, if you wanted to say live stream only on Facebook and you don't want anything fancy about it, you don't need any software. You can actually just do it in a web browser. But if you want to use a proper dedicated platform that's going to give you a larger tool set, as we're going to discuss in much more detail with Phil, you're probably going to be looking at more advanced things, whether that's software on your computer or a hardware encoder, which we're going to get to in a second.
Right. So if you want to do things like have a picture-in-picture layout or any of that kind of setup, I guess that's a big advantage of having a piece of software where you're not just having a single camera.
Exactly. At the basic intermediate level, you could have your high quality broadcast style camera or DSLR style camera, bring it into a capture card. Epiphan does make capture cards, to be fair, but they're capture cards in generic sense. Bring that into your computer, similar with your audio feed. Ideally, if there's a house mixer already in place where we can get house audio from what's already there, that's awesome. You're already familiar with how to run that equipment. We might just need an additional interface to get it into a computer. There are a lot of different possibilities there. USB-based audio interfaces that will take XLR and other professional audio feeds to allow that to function as an audio device for your computer.
So we have a question about someone asking if they can use a DSLR as a webcam. So maybe you could cover that, George, a little bit about what's the difference between a webcam that I can plug right into my computer and any other camera? Why can't I just take any DSLR and plug it right into my computer?
Right, and they're just not designed for that, simply put. Typically, a DSLR or that kind of very traditional camera for shooting stills and recording video, they're designed to do recording internally. So while they might have a USB interface to plug into your computer, they're designed to only transfer files. They're not designed to mount over a structure that a webcam uses. A webcam is based on what's known as UVC, Universal Video Class. And that's a defined standard of device type that webcams and capture cards conform to. A camera like a DSLR does not. It's not what they're designed for. They don't have that type of interface. It requires a different type of hardware and a different type of programming.
So I see we have two kinds of cameras. We have webcams, which are fairly limited in terms of
exactly.
image size or sensor size and that kind of thing. And then every other camera, more or less.
Exactly. And so the capture card becomes important because many of these good quality cameras like a DSLR, many of them will have an HDMI output. Now, you still do have to be careful about which cameras you choose when you're looking at this. And so we're using the DSLR term pretty broadly. We don't literally mean a DSLR in the sense that one that uses a mirror is actually probably a less desirable choice than compared to a mirrorless Micro Four Thirds or APS-C style sensor. The reason for that is that a mirrored traditional DSLR, that mirror has to lift every so often, usually every 20 minutes or so, and essentially the camera turns off. So even if the camera has a live HDMI feed, which many in that style don't, even if it does, you may get interruptions where you have to turn the camera back on every now and then, and that's not ideal.
No, and there's another question in here about with someone who has an HDMI mini output, and their complaint is that the signal comes and goes. And unfortunately, that's the nature of the HDMI plug, is it's not the most resilient connector. So especially when they start to go and they start to fall out, there's not a whole lot you can do. Sometimes you can get little cages to hold them in, but it's really just a hack. So
so we can dive into that a little more. But let's look at a variation of the intermediate setup where maybe we want to have multiple cameras, different angles, maybe a big wide shot from the back, maybe a close-up shot, or we need two different sides of the sanctuary, a pulpit versus something else, whatever the variation might be. You can definitely use two capture cards on many computers, but you're going to be looking at a much more powerful computer than something basic. So your budget increases pretty dramatically here in this variation. But it's generally a pretty similar setup. It also moves you into something where you definitely are going to be using specific streaming software like OBS, Open Broadcaster, or a Wirecast, or vMix.
Switch between the different camera feeds.
Exactly. The big advantage here is, of course, you can create different layouts, picture in picture, side by side, do all kinds of different things. You could then also introduce, exactly like we're doing in the webinar now, where you can bring in some extra content. And I know that was an earlier question we had specifically around the Pearl Mini, but in general, using streaming software like an OBS, Wirecast, vMix, etc., means you can add extra content like screen captures, PowerPoint slides. Maybe it's just video content from another computer through a capture card. There's lots of little ways to tweak that. But what it allows you to do is step things up a little bit. You don't just have a single static camera shot. You can then add the extra content. Maybe it's the passages that you're reading as part of a particular part of the service. Or if you are inviting people to sing along at home, you might want to have lyrics displayed. There's a lot of ways that can be beneficial. Sometimes it's just sharing general community updates. A lot of churches may want to share fundraising information and things along those lines. And so being able to add that extra content into the mix can be a very powerful tool for the community. And then again, you kind of need to move into the intermediate setup if you want to do that effectively. If we look at an advanced setup, this is really a modification of the secondary intermediate setup, if you will, in the sense that we're still looking at very similar cameras, PTZ cameras, things like that. Still looking at obviously hard mounting them on tripods or brackets, things like that. We're leveraging our audio system as we've talked about. We might start to introduce a video switcher, a big video mixer switcher to enhance, again, maybe we're talking more than two cameras and other video content as well. Oftentimes when we start to move to this level, things become much more efficient if we can use a hardware-based encoder in order to not rely on a computer doing this type of work. Computers are good at a lot of things. Your average purchased consumer level laptop that you may pick up at Walmart is not particularly designed well for doing video encoding. So your budget item to do it well kind of goes up. And a hardware encoder is something that's built to task. It's going to do something very specific and do it more efficiently, more stable. You never have to worry about viruses or reboots or, any of the other wild things that can happen on a computer that gets abused day to day with just normal tasks.
I hear a lot of stories from people who start out using computers and they start with capture cards and computers, and it's a great way to start. I would recommend it, but at some point, the complaint usually comes back is it gets a bit complex and not quite as reliable because things get a little hairy.
There's a lot of moving pieces.
If it's important to you that you have a setup that is going to be easy to use and not have a million pieces connected and stuff like that, a hardware encoder can really simplify your life, especially if you have volunteers. We're seeing in the chat here, or one of the poll questions we asked, who are you? And it seemed like quite a few of the people chiming in here are volunteers. And so we wouldn't expect you to become an AV professional overnight. Obviously, you might have to with today's need for streaming, but you want to make it easy on yourself. A hardware encoder can help quite a bit.
Yeah, so in our case here, this diagram is really focusing around using our Pearl Mini as a hardware encoder. It's definitely an advanced setup. It's definitely going to be a higher budget item for a lot of people. But the advantage is you don't have to worry about a computer and all the little gotchas there might be. I know an organization, a Christian camp that I volunteer for, I volunteer as part of their IT committee, and we've been going through huge amounts of things of just trying to figure out budgets for buying entry level, like $500 laptops. And those kind of laptops are not what you want to use for doing live streaming. So again, if we're talking about even budgeting for a laptop, you're talking at the upper end anyways. So you're not that far away at looking at a hardware encoder. When you move to the hardware encoder, your ease of use actually goes down. It becomes easier, and your stability goes way up. And oftentimes the quality of what you can do with it also goes up. So this diagram basically, as a Pearl Mini as its centerpiece, is kind of outlining the fact that you could use a 3-camera setup, professional audio from a mixer, feeding that all into a Pearl Mini. It's doing all of the encoding work and streaming it out to the platform of your choice. So that can be the centerpiece of all of it. A Pearl can do all of the mixing and switching and all these other pieces, add graphics and overlays and things like that, all on a single device. And a volunteer can use it and operate it from a touchscreen that's built into it for start, stop, and switching. So it can be very, very easy for the non-AV professional. Whereas trying to train someone how to use OBS is cool because it's free, but it's not easy. It's complicated. It's not something. Yeah, it's pretty challenging. So yeah, that's definitely something to consider. The other thing, obviously, to look at is going to be related to bandwidth. And I'm going to touch on this very quickly. And if people really want to dive into this deeper, we'll come back to it in the questions section because Phil's standing by and we don't want to leave him hanging too long here. In general, and this is a question that I get many, many times a day, is how much bandwidth do I need to live stream? So these are just two very, very basic general points, things to consider. There's a lot more that can go into this depending on what your particular setup is. But at a very basic level, if we want to stream full HD, 1920 by 1080, full HD, to a platform like YouTube or other similar platforms that can support that resolution, if you want it to be high quality, look good, not be blocky and pixelated due to compression artifacting, you want, generally speaking, a minimum of 8 megabit per second upload speed on your internet connection. So you can use a speed test. There's obviously speedtest.net. You can just Google speed test. Google has their own. There's fast.com, all these other different places that you can use to measure the internet connection speed that you have. When we're talking about live streaming, your download speed honestly doesn't matter that much. It's the upload speed that matters. The challenge is that internet service providers sell packages and advertise them based on download speeds because the number is usually higher. So you need to be conscious of which numbers are important and how to find out what they actually are. You also need to be conscious of the fact that what you're paying for from your internet service provider may not be real world. And so running the tests is very important. Running them multiple times to get somewhere an average number is important.
Mm-hmm. And one of the poll questions we asked was what kind of setup you're looking for, from basic to intermediate to advanced. And it seems like most of the people who have answered that poll are asking for an advanced setup. And if you're going to invest in a multi-camera setup with computers and really high quality equipment, the last thing you want is your network bandwidth to not really be up to snuff to carry this great looking production that you're going to invest in. So
absolutely.
And we have another. That's the poll that's just gone up right now. Which church service live stream setup appeals to you most? So if you haven't weighed in on any of these polls, please, it's interesting for all of us to find out how people are thinking.
One of the considerations, if you're struggling with bandwidth, of course, is to scale down a little bit, go from maybe full HD down to a 720p. Because when we do this, we can use a smaller bit rate on our encoding and uses less bandwidth. So for 720, you could probably get away with about a 5 megabit upload speed. Now, that doesn't seem like a massive difference, but in some geographic locations, that can be a world of difference, especially if we're talking about smaller rural areas where internet connections, you're not going to get fiber to the premise or that kind of thing. These are things we need to be conscious of.
Yeah, we've seen people from far all around the world here trying to do this, and I know that the internet is not great everywhere. So we should probably now jump, George, into the more platform side of things. We have a lot of considerations around gear, and we'll be here afterwards for questions for a little while, so we can chat more about that, talk a little bit more about Pearl Mini, because I know there'll be some questions around that. So obviously you've got your tech set up, and now the big consideration is, what do you do with that great production? Do you just put it up to YouTube and Facebook? Do you get a paid CDN, which offers, other features, that kind of thing? So we should dive into that and find out what people are looking for.
Exactly. Platform considerations are probably equally as important as your gear considerations. And so for that, we're going to welcome Phil in and have him join us here. Phil is from streamingchurch.tv. Welcome, Phil.
Welcome, gentlemen. Good to be with you again.
Yeah. So Phil, maybe tell us, give us the quick synopsis of who you are and what Streaming Church does.
Well, streamingchurch.tv, we've been working with churches for almost 20 years, and we are kind of organic. We started in a local church here in Tucson, Arizona, and we've expanded over the years. And we are a group that really works for the most part with churches and ministry organizations, nonprofits. And we have tools and different things that are kind of based for those users, tools and features that will help churches and different ministries connect with people, very interactive. And we really have tailored what we do for those organizations.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Of course, we've spoken with Phil many times on lots of different subjects. I've been a guest on their podcast that they have a couple of times, which is a great podcast with all kinds of information about this. But I know we had some questions specifically for Phil. So George, maybe let's go through some of those.
Sure. So Phil, I wanted to know, we don't get these kinds of questions, but what are people coming to you asking for when they show up at your door, not literally, and what are they looking for in a streaming service?
Well, especially during these times, people are pretty frantic. We have a lot of newer people during this COVID-19 deal. But what people are really looking for that come to us is, are there ways that they can be interactive with their members? And so while we do offer just a video-only platform, and actually it's an option that anybody can use, we have chat that's very interactive, automatic follow-up. They're looking for good customer support, which is one of our specialties. So we work really hard in helping both newer churches and people new to streaming, as well as people who have been around for a while. We really try to be right there for them as much as we can with, live chat on our website like you guys have in your area, as well as phone calls and emails. So they're looking for people that understand how churches and nonprofits work and how we can help them grow their church and reach their people.
And I think that's probably an extremely valuable point, right? Is that obviously in this day and age, it's very easy to just tell someone, hey, just live stream on Facebook or YouTube, it's free. But when you have a problem or you need expertise, you can't call Facebook, you can't call YouTube. There's no one there. So if you need help, those platforms aren't going to help you.
No, they're not. You get what you pay for. You get a lot of other things. So look, I'm not totally down on those guys, but you're going to get, in some cases, unwanted ads that are going to be popping up. You're going to have issues with your music that you stream. There can be there's the good old algorithm that copyright music sometimes is taken down. Even if you have a CCL streaming license, there can still be problems with that. We offer the ability to embed your streaming video chat platform on your own website. I think YouTube gives you that option, but you have to change it every week, I believe. There's a whole list of things. We offer customizing. You can do a lot of customizing with us. You can't with the free services. And you mentioned, George, support. My goodness, there's lots of things. But the biggest deal is these free services, well, they're good in a pinch. They're not really designed for ministry. And we have things like private prayer and ways to connect with people, automatic follow-up. We even do a deal called Simulated Live, which I'm not sure even some of our competitors provide, which is actually very useful during this time.
What's a Simulated Live, Phil?
So Simulated Live is something we developed years ago, and that is you can take a video that you've already done that's a streamable video, H.264, X.264.mp4 wrapper, and you can set that thing up to stream at a scheduled time, and you don't even have to have a live encoder to do it. As long as it's encoded properly, you can send it out, and you don't even have to be at the church. You don't have to be in front of a Pearl Mini. or vMix or anything. You can set it up and it will stream at a specific time.
That's a nice feature, I can imagine, to give people a bit of flexibility.
Yeah.
Now, tell me a little bit about your service and how it relates to churches specifically, because as you know, there's a million places you can go to have people host interactivity and live video from anywhere from Vimeo. In our case, we're using webinar-specific platforms. So what are the specific things that churches and houses of worship are looking for that differ from general video conferencing and video hosting platforms?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, you know, we have thousands of people that stream with us, you know, every week. I mean, thousands of viewers, and especially last week, you know, like 7, 8, 9 times as much.
Of course, yeah.
And so, you know, we can handle the loads under most conditions. There were some problems last week. I'm not going to lie to you, but everybody else had some problems too. We're gearing up for even a bigger weekend. But I think with us, it's the fact that it's very interactive. We have a feature that I don't know how many people actually have, automatic follow-up. So you can even connect with people that have watched your stream, and it will send out a customized email that you can, as an administrator, you can put together to reach out to these people that have watched you, first timers, second timers, third timers, even people that maybe watched you a few weeks ago and didn't come back. You can reach out to them automatically and say, hey, we haven't seen you for a while. Hope things are good. Those kind of things. And again, it kind of gets back to what I was talking about earlier. We have stuff that church management tools, follow-up tools, things that, you know, you can put donation links on your streamingchurch.tv platform. We don't handle the money, but we have the tools so you can put a code that your banking institution has provided for you, so people can give online, you know, even if they're not at the facility. Lots and lots of features.
So it's really a lot more than just a video hosting platform, which is always where we come to it from because we're a video technology company. But as you're saying, it sounds like it offers quite a bit of value outside of just the video component.
Yeah, and we've done that on purpose. You know, we're one of the originals when it comes to that, and we've done it intentionally that way.
Well, you must have all kinds of new customers coming to you right now.
We do. We've had a number of customers coming to us. Many of them never streamed before, and so we're doing our very best to help them. And I really appreciated what George was talking about earlier about the basic setup and the intermediate and all that stuff. And I've literally told some pastors that didn't have any equipment other than a webcam, you know, and a computer. I said, I don't care what you have to do, but stack the thing on a pile of bricks, and if you're in your office, you know, it's going to work. It will work, and it's good enough until things clear up and you can get some other equipment. So start where you're at, and you can always grow later.
Yeah, I think, and this might be coming in as a question at the moment, but I think George touched on this a second ago as well. One of the things we should probably touch on, because I get this question all the time, and I'm sure you do as well, Phil. People often misunderstand the differences between a live streaming platform, a CDN, if you will, like yourselves or like Facebook or like YouTube, versus a conferencing tool like Zoom, where oftentimes, because some of the terminology is used together or cross-reference between the two, they're actually kind of two very different things. You know, Zoom is an online conferencing tool that has a video component to it, but it really has more in common with making a phone call than it does with live streaming, where live streaming has more in common with a television channel than anything else. And so it's important to make the distinction between these two. There's definitely tons of space in this market and in this area for a platform like Zoom for maybe people looking to break out and do, you know, private Bible studies or anything like that. But it's not necessarily a platform that's going to work for many people if you're doing Sunday morning service.
Yeah, I mean, Zoom's limited as far as the number of people I think you can have on watching, and it's just there's limitations. Content delivery networks have the pipes to handle large crowds, and then, you know, it goes up to the cloud and comes back down on your website, your church's website, or a link, you know, embed code you can use, or a link to that area, and so you can take lots and lots of people.
Exactly. It opens up the possibility of how people participate, how they view it, but it also gives you better control over the quality of what you're doing. If we go back to
Yeah.
the bandwidth question earlier, part of that is about how you encode it. When you use platforms like Zoom or Skype or WebEx or whatever your choice is, they're all basically the same. There is no control over the quality of the image that you're going to get. It's just you cross your fingers and hope for it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And, for us, and I'm sure many of other providers out there that do this, I mean, we send things to Roku so people can watch on Roku or Apple TV as well. So lots of options that come with a provider like streamingchurch.tv.
Absolutely. So one of the things that you guys have that I've really enjoyed over the past few years of talking with you guys is your 10 commandments of streaming. So maybe let's go through those a little bit. And because I think these are just great points overall. So if we look at those, and I think you and I have talked about these before, Phil, but these are all excellent points. So maybe let's start with, obviously this was a creative way of delivering some technical advice to people in the particular market. But where did this come from?
Well, our team got together, and I don't remember whose idea it was. I'll take credit for it since nobody remembers, but it's probably Steve Lacey's. But our market for the most part are churches and ministries, and so we thought, we're always dealing with some of these things Sunday morning because we do provide live support Sunday morning, especially, and so we decided to put this together. Unlike Moses, we gave this to Steve Lacey. He came down the mountain with his iPad. Unfortunately, he got angry and broke it, just like Moses broke the tablets. And so we had a little problem with Apple support. But eventually, we got it up and going. But we put this together as really a good little list to help people, volunteers. You can use this for whatever you're doing. Doesn't have to be church stuff, but it's really good information that I think is worth a look at. And if you follow these things, it will really minimize the potential issues you might have when you start a stream.
Absolutely. So the first one is, of course, always test. And that's something that, that I've repeated 1,000 times on any of the content we've created trying to help people. And that is, test, especially when it comes to bandwidth. Those are very critical things.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead. I'll let you steer this thing.
Well, the second point there, I think, is extremely valuable within the context of streaming in general, but definitely important when you're talking about fostering community, and that's meet and greet. Make sure that you're being inviting and talking to people. And that's one of the things that's extremely valuable about being in a church in person, is that sense of community and talking to people and meeting and greeting. So in this context, we have to make sure we're still doing that even in a live stream.
Yeah, and this particularly is more specific to live chat, especially. If you have chat on your platform, like we offer people, we always encourage churches to have a host. Call it a web host, church online pastor. And so when you see people coming in your chat room, say hello, greet them, say hi. Maybe they won't say anything back to you, but at least you're reaching out to them.
Exactly.
Yeah, we have a nice bit of chit chat happening right now in our webinar forum as an example of that.
So another one is follow-up. And you mentioned that Streaming Church offers tools specifically around this. This is important, not to put too fine a point on it. This is important for any level of marketing, whether it's a church or a business or a community. Follow-up is extremely important. So finding the tools necessary that fit what you need. And I think what you guys offer at Streaming Church is a great example of that.
Yeah, it's a good tool to have, and it really helps, stay connected, especially during this time when people aren't coming into the buildings.
Yeah. The fourth one there is making the streaming video easy to find. And this is maybe a multifaceted one, in the sense that you mentioned, obviously, a lot of churches choose to embed it on their own website. Many churches don't even have their own websites anymore in the rise of social media. So making sure that you're sharing posts, or maybe embedding things into social media somehow, maybe even choosing to live stream on social media. Making it easy to find where your community already knows to go to get the information. That's important.
Yeah. One of the original ideas with this was we would go to help churches that were having issues with their stream sometime Sunday morning, and we'd go to their website. It's like, okay, where's the link? Where's the link? And we couldn't find it. You know what I mean? And it would be hidden somewhere.
It's got to be front page.
Right out there where people could see it.
Exactly. The other thing is to address your online community. As these things change, and obviously this is very important right now today, considering the global conditions, but in general, we're seeing online church communities grow, and this has been happening for years. This is not a new thing. So you want to make sure that you're addressing your community online, because they may be people that have come to you they're on the other side of the world. They're on the other side of the continent, state, city, whatever. They may never physically be in the church ever. So making sure that that community is fostered as much.
There's another reason we added this years ago, and that is, when there's people in the building and your pastor or whoever is getting up to greet people online and you're streaming, most time people go, hey, good morning, welcome to whatever, but also address that to the streaming, the people, the video people, for a couple of reasons. One is it lets the people in the congregation realize, oh yeah, that's right, we are streaming this thing live, and there's actually it's a bigger picture here than we realized, and it's also helped spread the word, because then people begin to realize, hey, you want to invite somebody to your church, you can always say, well, you know what, I understand you may not want to come right away, but you can always watch online because we stream online.
So the other one, can I interject here and suggest that we let's motor through the last 5?
Sure.
Because we want to leave enough time for about 10 minutes of questions at the end, because there's some good questions in the chat. So
okay. So so rapid fire ones, and I think some of these honestly are kind of follow-ups on the first 5 anyways. So number 6 is equip the members to invite. This is even easier if you're using social media, because people can share the posts, like the posts, and with their internal community of friends and family. With jumping in, creating online goals and measuring the results. Analytics, very important. If you are trying to fundraise online, making sure you have tools to do so, as you mentioned earlier, Phil, methods to donate and things like that is important.
And we have really good analytics, so you can always know who's online, and you can get an idea what's happening there and how it's growing, or if it's decreasing, what you can do to beef it up.
Again, coming back to it again, is using social media. So no matter where you're choosing to stream to, leverage social media. That's where everyone is now. Everyone's comfortable with that. Even grandma has Facebook. So, make sure that we're reaching out to those people. And then again, this is sort of a follow-up on the other one, make giving easy. Find the tools that allow people to give back as easy as possible. There's lots of options out there, but definitely making it easy is going to allow it to happen. If it's difficult or people have to go through all these different hoops, they won't. They'll give up. Right. So make sure you have those tools equipped. And then the other one is to always make sure that help is available. Whatever that may mean. I think that's a pretty broad one in terms of what that might mean by definition, but that's an important one, I think, for any community.
That's right. We try to be available as far as support for our customers, but also where you're at, make sure you've got some extra help that can help you with, maybe if you're volunteering, you have some tech questions, hopefully there's somebody around that you can trust at your church that can help you as well. And it's a wide range, but you want to kind of make sure you have things in order.
Yeah. And to me, when I read this, I feel that it boils down even into, like you were mentioning earlier, having hosts in chat. It's very possible that someone in chat may come to you with a particular issue in the middle of that stream, making sure you have hosts available, moderating that stuff, so that if someone is reaching out in need, that there's people there to assist. So for me, that one boils down. It's probably good that it's the 10th one, because it goes to a lot of layers, not just from a technical perspective, but just a community perspective. So,
absolutely, yes.
But those are the 10 commandments of streaming video. Again, these are all great tips as a general rule of thumb for live streaming, not just for churches. So we're going to dive into some Q&A here. I know there's a ton of questions we want to get through. So
George,
we
want to keep those questions coming, because now's your chance. We've got about 9 minutes left, and put them into the chat on the webinar, on the Crowdcast.
Well, hopefully people are using the upvote tool there so we can kind of look at those ones. So maybe let's dive into that. If you're not upvoting, take a look at it and upvote, or let's go from the highest voted.
Well, we have one already queued up for us, which is somebody's asking about older cameras, if they can be used that don't have HDMI out. So anything a capture card can work with.
Yeah, so here's the tricky part here. Older cameras, and I run into this a lot with churches because, again, budgets are tight and sometimes you're dealing with donated equipment or older equipment. Generally speaking, when we're talking about older cameras that don't have HDMI, it often means we're talking about cameras with composite video, meaning they're standard definition. They're not high definition. And that's honestly, in my personal opinion, not a good choice. You would be better off using a Logitech C920 webcam that can do HD, or going and buying a $200 handy cam, and having a better job in HD.
And you'll also run into the interlace problem too. A lot of those older cameras, even if they're an HD camera, they might well be interlaced, which is not going to look very good.
No, interlacing, for those people who don't know, there's kind of two different signal styles, interlaced and progressive. In the live streaming world, pretty much everything is based around progressive. And when you compress a video image, any sort of visual artifacting that we may not normally notice with the human eye becomes very apparent. And interlacing is a bad one for that. You'll see this weird combing effect through the image, and you don't want that, especially anything that's in motion.
Sure.
So older cameras that are interlaced only, or older cameras that are standard definition only, not ideal choices. Obviously, in a pinch, use what you got. But definitely, if you can use a 1080p, meaning progressive, you're going to be better off, and it's going to give you the best quality that you can. And again, streaming platforms today are generally built around 720p and 1080p, and not standard definition signals that are much lower quality.
We have another question about Pearl here. We have a few questions about Pearl coming up. Does Pearl support multi-bitrate stream uploads for CDNs that do not support dynamic adaptive bitrate playback? That's a mouthful, but you can probably explain a little bit about what adaptive bitrate is.
Yeah, so there's adaptive and variable bitrate. Sometimes those are interchanged. Pearl does not. Pearl operates as a fixed bitrate. So it does assume that you understand what your bandwidth availability is and setting a bitrate appropriate to that. CDN, the flip side to that, is that question brings up, is that a CDN, or content delivery network, might transcode into multiple bit rates, and it might not. Some CDNs, that's a package option if it's a paid CDN. If they don't transcode into multi-bit rate, it could cause an issue for viewers who don't have fast connections. If maybe your upload speed's awesome and you're going to live stream full HD video at 25 megabit per second because you're just amazing. But if it isn't being transcoded down and some of your viewers have slow connections, they might not be able to see it. So it's a consideration to look at. It's usually best to do that at the CDN delivery side as opposed to your encoder side, which is why Pearl doesn't do that. Pearl's a fixed bitrate encoder. But again, something to consider when you're looking at your audience and making those considerations, what that entire chain pipeline looks like. Now, is that something, Phil, to kind of look at that from a streaming church perspective, is transcoding and variable bitrate stuff, is that something that you guys do by default, or is it a part of a tier in planning?
It's more of a tier. People can do transcoding with us. It is more money. It's more money to do that on our end, and so we do pass that cost along. ABR is what we usually recommend for people that have vMix that allows that, or Wirecast.
Yeah, and I think the reason there is it's important to note that the reason why CDNs often charge more for transcoding is not because they can or want to. It's because it does cost more to do that in the cloud, if you will. It requires processing power. So the cost for the service provider to offer it costs them more. So that, as Phil just mentioned, pass it on, unfortunately. That's just reality of the internet.
So we have another question about Pearl. A lot of people have upvoted this one, which is, how can we put lyrics from songs, Bible verses, and instant text while we're currently live through Pearl Mini? So they want to bring in that secondary feed into Pearl Mini, and let's just say Pearl 2 as well. Like how would
yes. So there's actually a lot of ways you could do this. The simplest way to explain it at a basic level is you can use one of the video inputs on a Pearl to come in from a computer or video device that has that content. So maybe it's the computer that happens to be driving the projector that would normally show those passages or lyrics, in the sanctuary. Just taking that video feed into the Pearl has the options to create cropping and other things like that as part of its layout designer to maybe clean it up a little bit and focus on only what you want. That's one way of doing it. The other way is some people will use a Pearl Mini or Pearl 2 as just the encoder, and they might have a whole separate, broadcast style video production equipment in front of it for their mixing and switching, in which case you might be able to play with chroma keying and all kinds of fancy things. That's maybe even higher than our advanced level that we mentioned earlier. But I've been in churches that have, 100, 200 grand worth of equipment to do exactly this.
Sure.
If
they
you're
want a
in
lot of other effects too and transitions and
exactly, if you're at that level
in some of these larger churches, so no question they went to have another whole system in front of their Pro Mini.
Exactly.
Or their Pearl 2.
If you're looking at a Pearl 2, one of the advantages of going from a Pearl Mini to a Pearl 2 is that Pearl 2 has chroma keying built into it. It also supports NDI, which gives you another option to feed content into the encoder. So again, these are very much more advanced tools, but they give you a lot of possibilities on how to create overlays or add graphics in. At a very basic level, actually, what you're seeing right now in the webinar with myself, Phil, and George, as this 3-up shot, Pearl is doing that work, and a Pearl Mini could do that. So if you imagine, even when I'm sharing slides, Pearl is doing that work. You can do the same thing on your Pearl Mini from something presenting slides or content and cameras. So it can be that straightforward.
Well, we have a question for Phil here about someone's asking, do you have a suggestion about the length of your online services? So obviously it might be a little different than what you would do in person. Any best practices there to pass on?
Well, I mean, most of the time, most of our churches, stream the whole content, whatever they're doing. And we have a variety of churches that do 1-hour services, and some churches, depending on their culture, will do 2 hours. And so I think it really kind of comes down to your target, the people that I don't want to get too technical here with marketing terms, but your brand, because there are different cultures out there that stream, that have long services. That's part of who they are, and that's the big event for them. Is a Sunday is a long service, so they stream the whole thing, with simulated live, especially people that are doing some things right now because they can't stream. I would say keep it maybe a little shorter. My church, we're actually piecing things together. I'm doing a little intro. We have our music director is doing a song, and then we have our senior leader doing a message, and it's under an hour long. We're actually putting it all together and uploading it and streaming it like it's live. But again, it's really user preference.
Yeah, I think the main thing is, again, we're talking about communities. And so making sure that you're providing what the community wants or is used to is probably important, especially in these times. If you're used to Sunday morning being an hour, stream an hour, I think is probably the best rule of thumb.
That's probably good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're up against the clock here, Phil and George. So first off, thanks to Phil for joining us. We really appreciate you being here. You're always a great guest, and you know this industry far better than we do. So we lean on you for that kind of experience. For anybody who wants to know more about your services, Phil, do you want to give them a little, tell them where can they go to find out about what you guys do?
Just our website, streamingchurch.tv. Just make sure you get it right. There's other people that sound a little bit like us, but we're one of the originals, streamingchurch.tv. Great. And you can just surf there. You can contact us there. And if it's during business hours, we have a live chat. So you can pop in and say hello. Yeah.
Absolutely. And if you want to find out more about Epiphan, you can visit our website, epiphan.com. You can see all of our information about Pearl Mini and other streaming products that we have there, capture cards, and all kinds of things. So please drop us a line there. You can book a demo with George Herbert if you like, and he can give you a grand tour of a Pearl Mini or other equipment like that. Yeah, thanks to everybody for joining us today. We had a great reception, a lot of people in the chat as well. So
excellent.